All right, here we are, Surrendered Life podcast, and we're about halfway through this series. We're in the live portion. We 6 weeks through knowing what does it look like to know Jesus and his family, and then now what does it look like to live this as a rhythm of life. A lot of what we talk about in this idea of living the love story of Jesus centers around community. I mean, how does life play out? Who is it playing out amongst? And then what are the components of that? And so we talked about community. We talked about living in accountability. And today we're talking about just the general idea of living in rhythm and the things that come with that. And I think about Acts 2:42-47. It's kind of that staple go-to picture of the early church in community. And you get this picture of like, it's every little bit of life together. But in that, you see things like, man, they had all things in common. They shared all things. They were together daily, breaking bread in homes. And you just go, man, to do that today, you can't get that far in a daily rhythm without people just like irritating you. And so it's just this idea of like, how do then we walk into conflict together? How do we walk into grace together? How is forgiveness really actually restoring relationships? And so, but before we get there, I'm here with Nick and Chris and two friends, coworkers, fellow New Jersey people. That was a thing that was just, I had to say people because I don't know that like I had the word for it, but how do you guys know each other? What does this idea of sort of life together in your context look like right now?
You want to start?
Go ahead.
So we met each other. I was working for a wetsuit manufacturer. Chris walked up to me at a trade show trying to see if he could buy our products to sell them on Amazon. I said, "Get away from me, child. You don't know what you're talking about."
He did. He was not the
You
nicest.
say child.
I don't know if he said child. He might have. He said we don't need you.
Yeah, I'm good. I do a really good job. And then I realized we didn't. And then we started working together when I was at that other company. Fast forward a few years, I was kind of working on the side with him, helping him, close more business. Snowballed into us actually partnering together in the business that he started. And then that snowballed into us moving here as the business was growing and needed to be in the same place. And then that snowballed into our families being intertwined in that our wives are really close. Our children, call him and his wife aunt and uncle, and same with his kids. And so it's just, and then of course, when we moved here, this was our first church. First week we came here, we came to City Life, and we brought him along and his wife along first week. And so, yeah, it was just like, it snowballed into a point where like when you moved here, we didn't really have community. So he was the only people we knew. He was, my best friend and business partner. And then it just really became our lives just became so intertwined. So now we live, a few blocks away from each other. We see each other all the time, but it's just like our families as well. So.
Yeah.
So you're working together. You're friends. Like your families are genuinely like your friends, and then now you become you go to church together, and then there's the business mix.
Yeah.
And the proximity of homes. We're in the same neighborhood.
And you're in the same neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no way that you get far on a consistent basis unless like you figured it out, and then this conversation goes to a different level. But you guys would admit that you've walked into conflict together.
Yeah.
The nature of work, that all of those things in proximity to each other, and your strong personalities. You're both passionate about the things you're passionate about. You're good at the things that you do. And then those things just collide literally on a daily basis. And then and you can't even just leave them at work because now like you got to see each other walking down the sidewalk, and your wives are friends. And like, there is this true picture of this good picture of community. How has your relationship developed or grown or taken shape? It's even a weird question as I think about it, but through conflict, how has conflict grown you guys?
I think the interesting piece for us is that we're in business together. So there's the level of greed that gets in play, money, of course. And then when business is well, that's always easy. But then when business is tough, that plays on it. And then you like you said, you have this anger from work, and then you come home and our wives planned a dinner together. So now you're like in the same room, and we do a pretty good job. We'll just have a drink and we'll keep going.
Yeah.
But I think but the change has been, and I remember at one point Nick called me out on it, and he was like, "Hey, I think, or maybe I can't remember. One of us called one of us and said, 'Hey, you're being greedy,' and it's beautiful because you actually can, because of what we're taught and what we look to, you can like look back in yourself and be like, dang, you're right, you know. And I think we were able to speak that direct to each other, like, and I think that helps tremendously, because I think in a lot of relationships you just don't, you're just not that honest,
Yeah.
and that becomes an issue.
Yeah, I think Chris, when we first started, was just kind of exploring faith, and then
Yeah.
it developed over time, in kind of over the years of us working together, and but also so did our like early stages. We were fine. Like it was just like we're like grinding it out
Yeah.
together, doing it, and it wasn't until we grew and the pressure of more employees and bigger business and all of the things that go along with that, the stress of life. Then you throw in kids in the mix. Wasn't until those stages where we kind of hit some walls where like I definitely fell short in the way that I spoke to him or held back on things I should have said.
Yeah.
And same with him. And those times came to a head a few times. And if it wasn't for the faith that we have and to be able to point to that, to be like, no, we're not against each other. We're on the same side here.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would have continued on.
Yeah.
There was definitely some points where I don't think it would have.
You both said something. I want to draw that out and make the connection between the two. You said at one point, one of you looked at the other and said, "You're being greedy." And then the way that you said that, you were like, "But that was kind of like when you really think about it, that was kind of a gift. I needed to know that, or whoever that was needed to know that." And you received that in a way that was shaping for you. I feel like in a lot of relationships, and that's why we're having this conversation. In a lot of relationship, if a friend just fires that out there, it stings. It's like a jab. It's not a gift. I think a lot of people see that as confrontational or conflicting. And then yet you just then brought in this picture, which is where I wanted to segue anyway. And you're like, but there's this thing of our faith that helps us understand that different. Let's hang on that for a second. Like when we talk about working through these kinds of things, this idea of grace and forgiveness really outside of our faith isn't strong language. Like we fight to win. The problem is when we both fight to win, then we're going to fight until somebody loses, and that's not a healthy relationship. Somewhere along the way, there's this thing that goes, I have to carry this with a sense of grace, and even if feel wrong, I have to be able to, or wronged, I have to be able to forgive. How has your faith building your understanding of grace and forgiveness, how much has that been a part of really the fruit that you've seen in resolving conflict?
I think you got to go back, I think, one step, because our dynamic is when we first met, like he said, I was like a Catholic, but wasn't practicing, wouldn't really qualify as a believer. My goal was just like maximize financial goals and gains and burn the street in the process. And kind of where I grew up, that was the mentality, right? So when that changes, so does everything else. When that's no longer the goal, it's all good and easy to be like, well, great. But when it's so ingrained into your blood, you have to find new ways to put that energy into things. And to be honest, I'm still working through that, because I've been fortunate enough that we built a pretty awesome business together, where now it's like, okay, but that's not the end all be all. So where can I put my energy where it's not driving him crazy, because I'm coming up with different ideas, keep moving our direction. And so when you get called out, when you have that faith together, you can say, no, this isn't what it's good. Now let's start using it to good. Let's take care of the staff. And that's something that he's always pushed into me of like, hey, we can give more to the people that work for us. We have, Muslims that work for us, non-believers. Why don't we be the light for them? And so I think from my side, that's been a huge change for me of changing that all things matter about financials to no, it doesn't. That's still learning. But he does a great job of like calling it out and saying, hey, we have to be the example for them.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
It does a little bit. That's where this idea of then there is a posture of surrendered. You think of that surrendered life, and I have to stop and go, I desire as a follower of Jesus to live surrendered in these things. That therefore changes the way that I respond or react in these things when I feel like I'm taking shots. You guys, you guys are both just pretty unfiltered, pretty honest with each other. I think there's a lot of freedom in that. I think there's something really healthy about that. But I think a lot of times too, people would go, I mean, that can be intimidating. Or if somebody expresses themselves to me, maybe calls something out in me or gets upset at me, or I'm upset at them and I react towards them, I feel like that's where the dividing lines come from. And sometimes somehow you've found the spot where there's value in that. Like where's the line between speaking the truth in like genuine love and kindness, and then where's crossing that line where you would say you've experienced the other person going too far or being harsh or not walking in that grace or that forgiveness as they're sort of reacting in this conflict?
I would say that we both have failed and excelled on both sides of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it, is that, in that relationship, in these types of relationships, you're going to fail in the way. Like, I think there's all of us have a tendency to be like, oh, I deserve this, right? I worked hard, I deserve this, but ultimately we don't deserve any of it, right? And then you start to kind of piece that out, and you're like, if I take the time before I speak and say, I don't deserve this, this is a gift that I have, then when I do have to have that hard conversation, it changes my perspective and be able to address it. And then also, like, to trust that he's in the same boat, right? Like, I think there's, like, if you're, like, I was in business before with people that weren't believers, and having hard conversations didn't go anywhere. People get defensive, and I still have a tendency to do that too.
Yeah.
But there's no real way to kind of both be on the same team in that. And I think with us, having those hard conversations, we both ultimately know we want to be in a healthy position. And I think that changes it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this thing I feel like, the way you guys are saying it just makes it sound so comfortable and so easy. Like, why don't we all just figure it out like
It's
that?
not easy.
But there's, but this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think where I'm going with that is our culture. Like, it's not even so. There's a few pieces. There's the personality piece. So some people just have challenge with their personality being, whether it's healthily confrontational in a necessary way or in an unhealthy way, not doing it well. Some of that's personality driven. But I just feel like in our culture, we're not conditioned to react well to things that don't feel good from an interpersonal communication standpoint. And what's so unique about what you're talking about is we're not just talking about the workplace, like as if you guys how do we do this in a work dynamic? We're not just talking about this in a friendship dynamic or a neighbor dynamic or a community dynamic. Like you guys are literally swimming around in all of those together.
Yeah.
So how would you speak some calm or some truth or some peace or some rationale into a culture that is so reactive? Like, if you offend me, like, I'm either going to react back in an offensive way or I'm going to take my ball and run. How do we, as now dropping into this is like a church community, bring this into the church, and how do we walk through these things well from your experience?
I think the beauty is just recognize we're sinners.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if you call it out, I know that to be true,
Yep.
and I'm trying to work on it anyway.
That's good.
So yes, I think I can't speak to the culture that's not a believer because I don't think I can relate as much anymore to that. And if if everything to you matters of how you're looked and how you're perceived, then yeah, of course your reaction is going to be different. But if you know that you fall short, if you know that you're a sinner, then your response should be thank you in some capacity, right? Because we're gonna veer off. And I think that's the interesting way that we've kind of always worked together. Is I go off on my rails and then Nick kind of bounces me back, but I respond pretty well. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, yeah, you're right. I need it. So just realize you're a sinner, that you're not perfect.
The only thing I would add is that we generally want the best for each other.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, we don't always say that, but I think we do. I want him to be successful. I want his marriage to be healthy. I want him to grow in his faith. I want all those things. But just because all those things are entwined, there's friction that happens in those. And so it's like, there are times where, I think thoughts like, I want to punch him upside his head. Yeah. Right. And there's other times where I'm like, we spent 2 days in prayer this past week and him speaking to the Lord on behalf of some people, blew my mind in the growth that he's had. So it's like and even before that, we had a hard conversation about like some things that we're struggling with at work, and then we went right into the praying. And so it's like it's hard sometimes to turn those things off. And I do think like when I struggle with frustrations with work, just like you would with your wife, my faith struggles. Yeah. And so it's like you have to go after and attack those things and head them off, or they fester, or it creates division. And so like having those hard conversations get you beyond that to a point where you can be restored and in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. I think one thing too we haven't touched on too much is the wives in this as well. Is that they'll hold us accountable.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
You know, and because they're super close. I mean, so it gets more friction, but somehow releases it all at the same time. And I don't really like Maggie will call Nick out if he steps, and Morgan will do the same for me as well. Yeah. So like going back to how does this look in the church? One, it's time. Yeah. We've known each other for 5 years, and it's also I think everyone keeps saying this, it's intentionality. Like our doors are open. Like if I go home right now, there's a chance that Levi Remy's in my house. Or Morgan's at his house. I don't know. And if we're ever in a need, like Morgan hurt her back this week, the first thing we say is, all right, let's see if Maggie can help us with the kids. Yep. And it's not like, oh, it's going to be a bother to them.
Yep.
All right. So I think that's a huge piece, knowing you have someone to rely on. And we could have just gotten in a fight 10 seconds ago. But if I'm like, hey, man, I need this, it's a drop ball and we help each other.
Yeah. I feel like what you guys are talking about, you say it so smooth, and I think the way that I just see and work with people and hear how at large we just communicate as human beings is such a gift for the body of Christ. Yeah. Like we have to figure out how to really over communicate these necessary things that are on our hearts from this position of love and respect, gentleness and kindness. Like our motive, like the motive of our heart has to be, and Chris, to go back to that, as a sinner and a sinner, not a sinner and a righteous person.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we get mad, we take that position of I'm the righteous person and they're the sinner that's wronging everybody in me. I say this when I do premarital counseling a lot, like a sinner and a sinner doesn't equal a non-sinner. And that's exactly what we're doing in relationship with people. It makes a bigger mess, and that's where the gospel really comes in. And it's like it will be a bigger mess, whether it's a work relationship, a neighbor relationship, a friendship that's very transparent and raw and willing to hold each other accountable into the truth. That's just bound to actually get messier.
Yeah.
So how do we walk through that in a way? And it goes back. We have the tools that we need from the gospel. It is that grace. It is that forgiveness. It is that selflessness and that sacrifice for the other. And you say, well, how does the gospel model all of those things for us? There's one who did that and accomplished everything by it. Yeah. And then from that, we step back and we go, we know how to be selfless when we look at the cross. We understand sacrifice when we look at the cross. We understand certainly grace and forgiveness and in its purest, most powerful form when we look at the cross. So I love how you said that. It's just realizing that you're a sinner. Yeah. The way that you say it, like, well, that's all you got to do. But you know how many people be like, that's the one thing I refuse to do.
Yeah. But it's vulnerability.
Yeah.
Like when he calls me out for my sins or like my weaknesses, it's not a shock. Because I've said them, and you can't just magically change that. It's just something you're going to live with. So just try to work on it and get one step closer to to being that righteous, which you'll never get.
Yeah.
But if because you're so vulnerable to each other, there's really nothing you can say that the other one doesn't already know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah.
but
yeah, and I think you touched on it earlier. It's not an overnight thing,
right?
Like we had to go through seasons of. It sounds like everything's perfect because it still isn't. Like we still hit these things, but it took time. It took humility. It took seasons of struggle. It took both of us willing to come to the table. And I think you look at like a discipleship group or even a marriage, like none of this gets established in overnight or even a month or two. Like this is years of walking alongside each other, 2 by 2, focused on how do we grow in our relationship, with our community, in our relationship with our God, and have the desire to see us both, walk down that path together. And that time is, I think, just as important as the intentionality of trying to build that.
Yeah. I think we've lost the beauty of healthy vulnerability.
Yeah.
We've become afraid of it.
Yeah.
We've become afraid of what's going to happen on the other side of being really known. And so now, as opposed to seeing like the gift that's been given to us in community where that can be held in a safe space, we've become terrified of it, and now we isolate. I think that's one of the things that the church has a long way to go in. We have to treat each other different. We have to create space where vulnerability is welcome and celebrated. But it's got to be safe at the same time. If you guys could say one thing, sort of just a wrap up here, if you could say one thing to the many people who are Christians, and even at City Life, that are just, most people probably just from City Life listen to this anyway, who are kind of stuck by conflict. Vulnerability is a barrier. They don't feel like they're in safe relationships. They need to do the work, and there's just conflict. There's not grace. There's not forgiveness. There's a lot of selfishness, no sacrifice. What would be your challenge or your encouragement to those people?
First off, pray.
Mm.
Especially after the week we just came off of, and the miracles that we were blessed to see. Just pray. Just get on your knees and ask the Lord to bring those people to you. And it might not come tomorrow. It might not come in a week, but I believe we have a good God that'll bring it to you. And then be intentional. Don't sit in your house and watch Netflix. Sit out on your front porch at your neighborhood. And so, like, that's another thing that we do is we've really built a ridiculous community within our neighborhood.
Yeah.
By being intentional, by buying a Blackstone and rolling it out to the street and then cooking hot dogs. And you can make that look like whatever it looks like for you. And some people are weird and some people are going to hurt you. But eventually you filter through and you find the diamonds, and then you're lucky enough, you find a relationship like this, and through a few years, it'll get there.
Yeah. I think any relationship where there's multiple believers, it's discipleship in some capacity. And so, we have discipleship groups here, but even on a one-on-one, discipleship is not sitting down and having a Bible study. It is doing life together. And I think desiring to be in community and building enough trust and humility that you can speak truth and love to those people, it's freeing. Like, I think what happens, you look, the enemy wants us all to be siloed, to be stuck in our houses with our own fears and our own judgments of the world. And God's created a better plan where we are in community, where we can hold each other accountable, where we can grow together and fail together. Because ultimately, what does James 1 say? The testing of our faith produces perseverance to become mature and complete, not lacking anything. You have to fail. You have to have joy when you face those trials. You have to fail in order to grow. And if you're too afraid to fail, if you're too afraid to look good for the world, not look perfect for the world, then you're going to be a perfectly vulnerable for the enemy to take advantage of that.
I think you're in the head. Do you want to let the enemy win or not?
Yeah. The answer for the church is absolutely not.
Exactly.
And then going back to end where you said, and what's our greatest weapon? It's prayer. Yeah. Greatest weapon is prayer and worship. We defeat the devil with our prayer, and we get in the way with our worship. And I just love that. Chris, Nick, thank you guys. My hope is that, man, this would be a gift for everybody who listens, because just as a people today, we're lying if we say that we're strangers to conflict and the challenges that relationships bring. And I hope families get stronger just by listening to this, and our church gets stronger just by listening to this. So thank you guys for duking it out for the rest of us and showing up to talk about it. We'll receive it as a gift. Thank you guys.
No worries. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.